right, and hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about something that Cassie and I have wanted to talk about for quite a while, really probably since the Knights of the Old Republic remake have been announced. I guess we were just kind of waiting to kind of collect our thoughts and to think about it a little bit. But we wanted to really dig into, some of the things that are going on around the Knights of the Old Republic remake. And if you go to Google and you type in Knights of the Old Republic and politics or Knights of the Old Republic remake, you're going to get some results, and a lot of them are going to be complaints and people very concerned that this Knights of the Old Republic remake is going to be very political, and people don't want that. But we have a spoiler for everyone, and that Star Wars and Knights of the Old Republic, they've always been political, all the way back since 1977/2003.
Yeah, and I don't know, Star Wars, wars, are kind of inherently political, even if it's kind of like a war told in the conceit of like a space opera fantasy fairy tale, It's still political. And then, I don't know if you grew up with the prequel trilogy or watched the prequel trilogy, those are pretty political, and Star Wars in every trilogy, in every facet of the EU, it's always been political, and that's okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. And really all media, I mean, it's not, exclusive to Star Wars, but really all media kind of draws on, the politics and the goings on of the time. So if you look at like the original trilogy, into the late 70s, George Lucas took a lot of, he took Star Wars kind of in stride with what, was going on with like the Vietnam War, and, kind of some of the aftermath of, World War II, and his world building there. And then, obviously into the prequels when, that stuff's going on and you're getting a lot of stuff into like, Desert Storm, things like that. So, I mean, it's always just drawn from, real world politics, and that definitely carried over into Knights of the Old Republic. And a lot of the themes that you see in KOTOR are, based off of those, right? Early 2000s. So, it was in the aftermath of like the September 11th attacks and the War on Terror, Saddam Hussein, all of that stuff was going on. So that was kind of the real world political spectrum that the creators of this game and the Star Wars universe were drawing on.
Yeah. And I kind of have to mention that a lot of the outrage I think I've seen like in conjunction with the remake news, like I don't think it was really produced in good faith, and it kind of seemed like it was kind of algorithm driven / manufactured outrage,
Sure.
Kind of more for clicks. And that's not like just particular to like Star Wars. I think it definitely is a problem like in our society. It's hard because you want to engage people and have them click on things, and like it's kind of designed to be like driven by outrage, and that's kind of a larger question. But I think like for our podcast, what we can do, like talking about the KOTOR remake, is like reminding people like the creators behind the remake aren't gonna just put things in arbitrarily. It's to tell a good story. And KOTOR and Star Wars have always been political, so we're just going to kind of remind you of a few things. Like, I'm not going to say, like, this episode is going to be all, is it inclusive or exclusive? Like, all of the, it's not going to cover everything in the KOTOR game. That's
it's definitely not going to be, all encompassing, I guess I'll say it like that.
That's what I meant to say. I swear I'm smart sometimes, But
we thought what we would do, to just kind of go through this. We thought it would be, kind of interesting, educational for us, maybe for everyone, listening, and just kind of touch on some of the politics that were going on within Knights of the Old Republic. So when you see articles, that are questioning, how political and all this stuff is the remake going to be, just remember that, KOTOR has always been this way. Star Wars has always been this way. So, let's just we'll go like planet by planet a little bit and, just kind of hit on some things. So, we start off Terrace. And Terrace, you know, obviously is very political. It's the city that's built on 3 tiers, and basically your lot in life is going to get you onto those tiers. It's literally a planet of class separation.
Yeah, and I kind of think like Terrace is the most political planet that we see in KOTOR, and we spend the most time there. And I think that's intentional, because you kind of get to see what like the war is kind of doing for the galaxy, what this one particular world is like, what the time period is like. And yeah, I mean, I played this game like since it came out like in 2003 through middle school and everything, and it's always been kind of on the back burner. And kind of replaying it as an adult, I was like, oh my goodness, like I think like some stuff just went over my head, like this is so political. And then I was kind of like, man, if this is remade, and then when the remake was announced, I'm like, there are going to be a lot of angry people who don't realize like this was, kind of how the original was written. They're going to think it was added in, but I'm like, this is the original recipe of KOTOR.
Yeah, and it was a lot of just interacting with people on Terrace, through the 3 different levels, and kind of learning about the different class systems. You had the Sith, the office building or whatever there, so they were taking over, not letting anyone leave their stations on Terrace. There's literally a character, his name is Gorton Kolu, you can go talk to, and he's running like the anti-alien league, and he's trying to get all of the alien species like rounded up and shipped off of Terrace. Just a bunch of crazy stuff going on there. And like Cassia said, you spend kind of the most time there, and if you really go around and talk to people, it's all of these different ideals and ideologies that you have going on. It's really very interesting.
Yeah, I would say Terrace really kind of hammers home the kind of like classism and racism through the lens of like sci-fi. And I mean, if you agree with Gorton Kolu, his anti-alien ideology, you're going to get dark side points, and like it's kind of saying like this isn't good,
Right.
So I think like they're trying to teach you lessons, and I don't know, like each of the levels you kind of like Upper Terrace, it's like it looks nice, but it's kind of gilded, and then you kind of go down low, to the lower city and undercity, and it's kind of like, wow, like this planet like has some serious problems.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you get down into the lower city, and that's where all of the poor people, the poor population are. They don't have access to the same, medicine as they do up on the top level. Like they can't even see the sun. Very reminiscent of what we saw in Coruscant, and that really, as far as like the racism and like that anti-alien agenda, that's really something that BioWare did a really good job of kind of exploring throughout this game, and then carrying over into the Mass Effect trilogy too. So yeah, Terrace definitely like the political epicenter, getting you started like very first thing in the game. That's the stuff that you're coming up against.
Yeah, and something you hear about in the upper city and lower city, but you kind of see firsthand in the undercity, is like the Ratghoul Plague. And I just want to say and congratulate myself, like this is a self-congratulatory kind of thing I'm doing, but
okay,
I never did a COVID Ratghoul Plague crossover meme. I never, like on the stories or posts, like to my knowledge, I never did that. So, and it was like kind of like everyone was posting it, and I'm like, you know what, like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna do that. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was the thing with the Ratghoul serum, right? Is that the Sith, they had like the Sith troopers, they all had access to the serum for this Ratghoul disease, and all the guy at the clinic up on the upper level, he just wanted to get it so he could make it available for everyone.
So they put privatization and like making money before the health of the general population.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I hope that's not what happens in real life, but
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then anything else on Terrace?
Yeah, I think that kind of sums up Terrace pretty good. Like I said, it's a really good introduction into this political world of KOTOR. So we're off from Terrace. Terrace meets its untimely end, but we get to Dantooine next in our story here. And yeah, it's still more politics going on. So this is where the Jedi Enclave. The Jedi are the police / peacekeepers / judge and juries of Dantooine. And yeah, it's very much like a centralized government here that we have going on.
Yeah, and what I kind of noticed is like this is the kind of the Jedi Council at their worst, kind of like most culty. Maybe that's wrong, but the vibe I get is like the Jedi Council is the end all be all. There's kind of no room for like dialogue or debate and like kind of like different perspectives, and it's kind of just like, oh, you're not a master, we don't really care what you say, Padawan Shan,
Right.
We know what we're doing. You don't need the whole you don't need all of the information, Revan. Well, they don't call him Revan, but
right, sure.
Like, yeah, so it kind of just seemed like the Jedi Council is like not sharing all the information and kind of just says, you're going to do what we said because we said to, and if you don't, we could just expel you from the Jedi Order. But if you leave, you're just going to fall to the dark side. We're the only way forward. Like, we're the only interpretation of the Force, So.
Yeah, it's very dogmatic and religion-like, right? The way that they operate, and we see that with the Jedi Council, all the way back here in Knights of the Old Republic and up through and into the High Republic. If you're reading any of that, you should be, and even up into like the prequels when we ultimately see like the fall of the Jedi, and it's this dogmatic approach to. These are our rules and we're not going to change them, and we're not going to take any advice or, outside influence, and we don't want to hear new ideas. And, this is what it is. And and that ultimately, leads to the undoing of the Jedi. But yeah, we definitely see it on full display here, in the start of our KOTOR story.
Yeah. And in episode 45, Ironic Designs and I were discussing Juhani, and Nick, he was kind of talking about how Juhani, he saw her as like kind of like an allegory for a gay person who is kind of struggling with who they are, like kind of raised in a religious, like a strict, like kind of demanding religion, and like kind of like being like, oh no, like I'm gay, what am I gonna do, and kind of just like trying to come out, and then it like doesn't work out, and then like they kind of act out. Juhani was the first LGBT character in Star Wars, actually, and the writer, like, it was intentional, like she was like, oh, I have to work on this. It's like, okay, I'm only gonna do this if I can write something progressive, so
yeah. Not only was Juhani, the first LGBTQ character in Star Wars, she was one of the very first in all of video games. So I mean, definitely taking that real world influence and giving voices and characterizations to people in the story, and that's one of the things that really draws I think both you and I to it, as well as a lot of other people that grew up with these games, is that you hadn't had the opportunity to see yourself necessarily in a lot of these stories before, but with the ability to create your own character and make your own decision and have your own sort of love interests and things, and have characters from different backgrounds, all of that stuff, you really got to feel like you were a part of this world, no matter who you were. So I think that, the inclusion of Juhani in the story was really important.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because when it came out in like 2003, I think like more people behind the scenes like kind of had to hedge their bets or like weren't like on board with it. Like so there kind of was a glitch when it came out. Like it was kind of, the Juhani relationship was just meant to be for females, but like when it first came out, like it could work for females or males, but then it was kind of fixed. Like they said it was a glitch, but I'm like, like
Yeah, sure.
and then like they kind of had to make some of the relationship a bit vague, and some of Juhani's dialogue was cut out. But I hope like in a remake, like Juhani's role would be fleshed out and expanded upon.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so after Dantooine, we're going to make a couple of stops here. We're going to go to Kashyyyk and Tatooine. And, we've had episodes just specifically about these, with our good friend Juhani D. There's episode 59 for Kashyyyk and episode 76 and 77 for Tatooine. But on, both of these locations, it really kind of leans into and tells the story about what the indigenous experience is for these native peoples of these planets. And those episodes are very excellent. So please go and listen to those, check them out, and follow Juhani on Instagram for his artwork and stuff. But yeah, the indigenous experience, really important to the story.
Yeah. Our podcast would be so much the poorer if we didn't have like Juhani's insight, and I've learned so much from him being his friend, and like honestly, like I kind of don't. There's a few episodes before 59 that I love, but like a lot of them I'm like, oh, these are super cringy. I took myself so seriously, and it's like, but with 59, I was kind of proud of myself. Like we're able to do a really good episode, like kind of about real world stuff, and then like there was some Star Wars stuff in it, So I was happy with that, and because Kashyyyk has a bit of it all, I think. Like when you first land, it's like in the very first few bits of dialogue, you kind of learn that Zerka Corporation is kind of just trying to drive out the Wookies, kind of take away their sovereignty. A lot of cultural erasure is happening, and it's kind of coming from the top down, and then you kind of see like I don't know, it's kind of like the company's bureaucracy kind of just trying to take over, and you see police brutality, like I would say like the Wookiees definitely are an allegory for like indigenous populations, especially like in the areas where like there's nature that really should be protected.
Yeah, I had that kind of as a note, just as a general theme for all of Knights of the Old Republic. You have Zerka here, and they're basically, going out and laying claims to all of these planets, all these indigenous lands, and they're, just basically declaring that these resources are theirs now, and they're gentrifying planets and enslaving like the population of Kashyyyk. They're enslaving the Wookiees there, and then they're out taking the native lands from the Tuscan Raiders on Tatooine. And we talked a lot in that episode with Juhani about Tatooine, about the indigenous experience with the Tuscan Raiders, with the Sand People. And, we talked a little bit about what at that time had been going on in The Mandalorian. And now, we've gotten to see a little bit more of it. Hopefully, we get to keep exploring it here in the Book of Boba Fett too. But yeah, really important stuff that we covered in those two, so go give them a listen. And yeah, I think that, native species to these planets, another big political part of KOTOR.
Yeah. Episode 2 of the Book of Boba Fett, like, it's what made me a Boba Fett person, and I think Stephanie Green just directed, like, the best episode, like, one of the best episodes I think we've gotten on Disney Plus. I was so impressed.
Hmm.
And then like episode 3, not quite my favorite, but I don't know. I hope that some of the Tuscans survived, because I kind of felt betrayed seeing,
Hmm.
I don't know, like they were built up so much in episode 1 and 2, and then it's like some of them are dead. I hope some of them survived. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully that story continues. Hopefully it wasn't just another opportunity to treat the Tuscan Raiders, or the allegory of indigenous people as kind of this storyline of what we've seen 100 times. Hopefully we change the story up a little bit here, and hopefully as of recording, maybe we'll know a little bit more about that. So before this even comes out, but yeah, fingers crossed for that, definitely.
Yeah. I do have to mention like episode 2 um, of Book of Boba Fett. I really enjoyed that they talked about the oral tradition of the Tuscans, because that's even
Hmm.
brought up in KOTOR. Like it was a
Yeah.
very intentional choice, I think, when BioWare wrote it, like to kind of also kind of mirror the indigenous populations around the world, because indigenous populations are the first storytellers, and you can learn a lot from oral traditions.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so with Manon, I'm kind of like, I kind of think this is like maybe the second most political planet. I mean, they're kind of all political in their own ways, but like replaying Manon as an
Hmm.
adult, I was like, wow, a lot of this went over my head as a child. And
Right. Yeah.
now I'm playing it and I was like, oh, wow. Because Manon, it kind of seemed like a representation of like the Middle East,
Hmm.
and Kolto is definitely was written to kind of be a stand-in for oil. What did you think?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. So you have this natural resource that is only abundant in one place in the galaxy, and that is on Manon. And you have everyone, all of these warring factions and uh, separate economies and things have to sort of come together and have to play nice on Manon to get this Kolto. Um, yeah, it definitely gives me a lot of the same things that we see in real life going on with the Middle East, and in terms of getting oil for everyone, because that's the natural resource that everyone needs to keep the world turning. So you have kind of this really distinct kind of uh, comparison between the two, and then on top of that, because of the way that you get that just kind of keeps this like Cold War of information, just keeps those gears churning. And we still see that today. I mean, the Cold War was a product of the '70s. You see a lot of kind of similar or inspirations from that drawn into like the original trilogy of Star Wars, but really that war of information, I mean, it's continued to go on, and it's always going to be when you have big political struggles at kind of this thing where they're kind of butting heads, and you can't really have an all-out war. So what do? You have a war of information, kind of behind the battle lines.
Passive aggressiveness.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, it definitely just feels like a Cold War. And on top of that, you kind of have like a political trial, and like you definitely are kind of meant to see like the tensions like of the Republic and the Sith forces kind of forced to play nice, but you kind of learn what they are as not just like ideologies, like light side, dark side, but like kind of political structures. And I
Hmm.
don't know, I think it would be really rich in an adaptation, to kind of utilize Manon to kind of really flesh out like the political structure of the galaxy and kind of like deconstruct it. And I don't know, like what kind of films do you think like kind of are in that genre of Manon?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to our episodes about there, the one that I always kind of draw the comparison to is like Argo, just from like a tension setting kind of a thing. But actually, you just mentioned Steph Green, and she directed some episodes of The Americans. If you've watched that television show, it's excellent. I'd recommend going to check that out. But that's, about two Russian spies living in the United States during like the Cold War there. So a lot of kind of parallels to that as well. So what about you? Any good films or books, stories that kind of remind you of this Manon section here?
Spielberg, I believe he directed Bridge of Spies, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and then The Hunt for Red Dawn. I think it's free on YouTube, so I really have no excuse for not having watched it already. But
sure.
Or is it The Hunt for Red October? Did I say that?
Well, you said The Hunt for Red Dawn.
Red Dawn. I saw the new one with Chris Hemsworth, so it's like I saw it for the right reasons. But
well, if you're thinking of the submarine show with Sean Connery, then that is The Hunt for Red October. So
The Hunt for Red October, because it's red and it's October. Yeah, I need to watch that one. But I also kind of like, one thing about Manon is that Kolto is like a finite natural resource, and like kind of like the war machine complex, of the Republic and the Sith, like jeopardizes like the big sharks. Is it Firaxan sharks and like the Kolto? It's kind of like killing the environment of Manon, which I guess you could kind of say like the war kind of is poisoning the galaxy, and poisoning that world in particular, because I actually really love Manon. Kind of like when we were recapping our KOTOR cinematic adaptation that won't happen cinematic universe, I was like, Manon kind of like can represent like the state of the galaxy, the world, like it's half Republic, half Sith. And then it's kind of like, at that point, like, I think like Bastila and Revan, that dyad, I guess, are like kind of like, in the middle, they could go either way. So
right.
Manon is awesome.
Manon is awesome. Manon is very interesting, and yeah, definitely ties into real world politics there. It would be interesting to see if there was like a half step. So in the Knights of the Old Republic, we have Kolto, and by the time we get to the High Republic, Kolto is starting to phase out because they've figured out how to make Bacta at this point to manufacture it. So it'd be interesting to see like the go between and how that would mirror the real world, whether there would be a pushback against getting off of this Kolto, this natural resource that a lot of people make a lot of money from. So
yeah, maybe it's Kolta or Bacto. I don't know. So.
Bacto, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of wraps up Manon. What about Corbon? What kind of politics do we have going on in Corbon? This one's pretty one-sided because it's where the Sith and the Sith Academy are. So yeah, a little bit one-sided. But what about Corbon? Cassia, what do we got going on there?
So Corbon is kind of the homeworld of the Sith. It's kind of like a whole lot of tombs, It's kind of like, because in my mind, like the dark side is kind of just like the death of things, Like they try to like make all these grand like tombs and everything for when they die, when the Sith die. But at the end of the day, like when you die, you're dead, like it doesn't matter which coffin you're buried in, So kind of like the futility of like wealth and gain, and kind of like the Corbon Academy. Definitely, you kind of see like, I don't know, like, is this too much to kind of say, like, I kind of think the Sith are all like fascists, like, and it's kind of just like the Corbon Academy is kind of just like indoctrination camp for like Sith, and it's like based on like really bad leadership, like favoritism, hazing, bullying, and my guess in an adaptation there would probably even be nepotism. So
yeah, no, I think that's fair because that's how the Sith are basically set up to exist. That's how George Lucas described the Sith, and that's how we see them here. You made a good point. They have these big tombs, and that it's at the end of the day, everyone dies, and basically the Sith, were in it for themselves. So they accumulated wealth. They have these treasures and these relics, but all of these, the Sith, they were all buried with them, right? Like they didn't go out and conquer these things and amass these things to pass on to future generations, or the knowledge. So you quite literally have to like break into their tombs and beat their security to get these things.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think like Corbon is maybe kind of one of the more allegorical planets rather than like kind of real world political, but I think there are still lessons to learn there. But maybe you kind of just have to dig about them. But I think it's definitely kind of a philosophical kind of look at like different leadership styles. And I mean, we had our episode. What number was that where we kind of talked about Corbon and its politics?
Yeah, our episode with Gabe Young. Check him out on Instagram too. I think it's at the Gabe Young, I think is the name. Let's see. That episode was number 86. So it's episode number 86. Yeah, with the Gabe Young, and we talked about Corbon, kind of in our film adaptation, and then talked about the kind of the political struggle going on there with the Sith, and touched out a little bit more into all of KOTOR. But yeah, that was a really good conversation. And yeah, I guess if you just look at the Sith just as kind of a political power in and of themselves, in this warring faction, then definitely there's some things to take away there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely lessons like to learn from the Jedi and Sith, and sometimes you can learn those lessons through bad examples, probably even more lessons from bad examples. But yeah, it just kind of there are lessons to learn that are political there. It's not just allegorical, light dark side, but
plus you have the confrontation with Karth and his son, and they're on different spectrums of their ideology at this point in the game. So trying to rectify that, and understand where Karth and his son are both coming from in that time as well. So
yeah, and that would be interesting to see in an adaptation. And one thing that might be hearsay is I believe the Sith code might have even been written for this game, and I think the person who wrote it actually based it on writings from like Hitler. So I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't think you're supposed to really identify with this, but yeah. So I think like, even though like I kind of think Corbon is the least political of the settings in KOTOR, it's still political. So
yeah, definitely.
And then Rakata, are we calling it Rakata Prime, or Lihan? Or the unknown world?
I'm calling it the unknown Rakatan world. No,
the unknown Rakatan Lihan world.
We'll just. I think we normally call it Lihan. I don't know. We'll call it something. I guess. But what do we have going on here? It's basically you have the Rakatan Empire, and they were huge and tried to take over the whole of the galaxy, but in the end, empires fall, and that's what we get to learn about here. You can't sustain that growth, and the pursuit of that, ultimately is going to lead to your downfall. And that's something we've seen with empires from, the beginning of recorded history, and it's no different here on Rakata, on Lihan.
Yeah. It's always so interesting, like so many like dynasties and countries say like our empire will last 1,000 years, and like it's like you didn't even make it 200, like, and like I love history. I'm a nerd, and like there's so many like empires like people haven't even heard of or talk about today, Like,
Hmm.
not a whole lot of movies sometimes, you know, and it's like sometimes like uh in my life personally, like growing up in the US, like people kind of like maybe sometimes they're like, "Oh, this is the greatest country that has ever been," you know, or like we're perfect, like we don't the world can learn from us and we'll be here
Hmm.
forever. And I don't know, like I think there's stuff to learn. There's always more to learn from the
Hmm.
past, the present, and like thinking about the future. And
There's always ways to improve, right?
yeah, improvement. You can always improve and like kind of think critically about yourself as an individual, as a community, and like as a nation. You know, and I think like Lihan kind of illustrates like the Rakatan Infinite Empire, like literally enslaved like the whole galaxy, but their downfall came about through those that they were oppressing, you know, and
Hmm.
they kind of turned to the dark side and they crumbled and people barely remembered them, you know, like you wrote this perfectly. The pursuit of size and strength and might can't be sustained.
Yep. Yeah, and that ultimately leads to the downfall, right? You have the uprising of the enslaved people, and yeah, you can't sustain that. It's not it's not a good business model to just to keep going no matter what. You have to step back. But yeah, definitely, it's definitely just a an illustration of, like I said, of all of these empires that we've seen throughout history kind of rise and fall.
Yeah.
Here on Rakata, and the Rakatans at the height of their power and their glory, they designed something called the Starforge, which is very literally a giant space machine that just cranks out stuff for war. It's literally a big war machine in the stars for the Star Wars. And yeah, that was kind of their crown jewel, and that was when they started to fall apart. And that's where the story ends on KOTOR. That's where you end up at this big manufacturing complex. It's what all of the Sith. That was what they wanted. They wanted it to be their crown jewel, I guess. But yeah, so we end up on the Starforge. So what are your thoughts about that, Cassia?
Yeah, the Starforge is quite literally like a machine that represents the military industrial complex.
Hmm.
And it's different than the Death Star, even though it's meant to evoke the Death Star. And I'm like, that's good, you know. Not everything needs to be a Death Star, and like I kind of think like storytellers could have more fun with the strengths and the weaknesses of a Starforge. Like I think it would be kind of a unique challenge, you know, kind of to
Hmm.
convey in storytelling terms. But what I hope is like if there is a KOTOR adaptation, they're like, what if there's a Death Star, but like 4,000 years ago? You know, it's like no,
Yeah.
like I would be like no, I would be mad. But it's it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's interesting that at the height of this Rakatan Empire, at the height of their strength, it basically all of their pursuits and all of their energy was poured into this thing to just create more war. And yeah, I think that's very telling, and definitely can have some real world parallels here. As we're kind of looking through KOTOR on a political lens.
Yeah, I mean, kind of something it represents for me is like the atomic bomb. Like each side is trying to find it
Hmm.
for their own purposes. Like, and the Jedi Council, like, kind of at their most shady, you know, like, kind of using like an ex war criminal kind of lying, you know, to them. And it's
Hmm.
like, I don't know, it kind of just reminded me of like the Oppenheimer, you know, kind of like the creation of the atomic bomb. I can't wait to see that. It's an upcoming Christopher Nolan film about Oppenheimer. So,
Hmm. it would be interesting to, if you could do some revisionist KOTOR history and imagine that if the Jedi would have gotten to the Starforge before, Darth Malak would have found it, what would have been different? Would the Jedi have claimed it for their own? Or, I don't know. That's just kind of an interesting thought experiment here for Knights of the Old Republic. But definitely, like I said, definitely mirrors, some real world politics and this industrial war machine going on. And, that's kind of where the KOTOR story ends. And, we could probably go through KOTOR 2 and come up with a whole bunch of other, examples of this. So, yeah, I guess just for us, we just wanted to kind of take a step back because, ever since the remake's been announced, there's been a ton of excitement, but there's been a lot of pessimism and negativity. And like Cassie said, just people being disgruntled for the sake of getting clicks and things. And it's just something that we wanted to talk about, to remind everyone that, this KOTOR isn't going to be any more political than the KOTOR that you already know. It's probably going to reflect a little bit differently because it's going to be made, in the 2020s as opposed to, the early 2000s. But yeah, it's going to be cut from the same cloth, so to speak.
Yeah. And I'm sure in this episode we left some stones unturned, and you can tell us, be sure to tell us, if you think we missed some aspects of different planets or, some interpretations, we're always here to learn, and we love KOTOR, and there's a lot of lessons to learn from KOTOR and Star Wars, and when it comes to the remake, just be cool, don't harass, the creators, be kind online and in person, and and Star Wars and KOTOR have always been political, and it's political, I think, because it's meant to be educational and to teach us important life lessons.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, KOTOR has always been political, and KOTOR is for everyone, and that's our stance on it. So yeah, definitely let us know if we kind of missed anything, or if you have good examples, or if you have favorite examples from KOTOR too, because we definitely want to hear them, because we think that kind of this subject is pretty interesting, and we're excited to finally get together and chat about it for everyone.
Yeah. Star Wars is for everyone, Darth Revan is for everyone, and KOTOR is for everyone.